welcome to Swedish Plant Guys. This time we are going to generalize quite a bit, so please bear with me. Now we're going to try and answer a question, and the question is, can you just by looking and touching, feeling a plant, know how you are going to take care of it and where to place it in your home? We say that yes, 8-9 times out of 10 you can do that. So we're going to make a couple of generalizing statements on what to think about when you look and feel the plant. Now this is all based on our 20 years experience of taking care of thousands and thousands of plants. So it's not a scientific proof of any sort. It's based completely on our experience. Now, the first thing is, of course, if you know the name of the plant. This will help you quite a lot, because if you buy, for instance, a Dracaena, and you have a Dracaena or have taken care of a Dracaena before, then you know just how to take care of this Dracaena because you have experience of the other one. So if you have the name of the plant and you have some previous experience of it, and of course you can also Google that name to see how to take care of it. That is maybe the first and most important thing, is to know the name of the plant. Now the second thing is to look and see if the plant has a flower on it, or if you know that it's going to flower within a period of a couple of weeks or maybe a month or so. If it's a flowering plant, it usually means that it needs to be put somewhere where there's a lot of light, and you need to water it quite often. It needs quite a lot of water. But if it's a plant that doesn't have flowers or is not going to flower, then you know that it may not need that much light. Now the third thing to look at is the color of the leaves. Now a general idea is that the darker green the leaves has, then it needs less light and less water. Now if you go to the other side and you have a lighter variation of green, that usually means that it needs more light and a little bit more water. So dark green and light green is what you can look at on the leaves. But you can also have some form of color on the leaves. For instance, here we have two different types of pleomeles. Now they are from the same family, which should mean that you take care of them almost the same. But in this case you have the Pleomele Song of Jamaica here, and I have the Pleomele Song of India. And there is a quite a big difference between these two plants, even though they're from the same family. Now the dark green Song of Jamaica can stand quite dark and doesn't need that much water. It wants to dry out in between waterings. But the Song of India, which has these yellow big parts on the leaves, it has to be put in a light spot, and it wants a lot of water. And by a lot I mean it wants almost twice as much water as the Song of Jamaica. So not only the variations of green on the leaves, but also if there are any colors on the leaves, it usually means that you have to put them in a light spot with a lot of water. Now there is another version as well that is called variegata, which means lack of color almost. It usually means that it has a lot of green on the leaves, but there are parts of the leaves that is lacking the green color. It's almost white or light gray. Now if it has this, then you should treat it like it is a color on the leaf, which usually means that you have to put it in a lighter place and give it a little bit more water. Now number 4 on our list, we go back to the leaves again, but this time check the thickness of the leaves. And what do I mean by that? Well, just take your fingers and feel on the leaves. Are they quite soft and thin, or are they thick and maybe hard? Now if you have a leaf that is quite thin and moves quite easily when you touch it, that usually means that it needs quite a lot of light and it needs a little bit more water. Then if you have a plant that has very thick leaves or very hard leaves. Now this is a Samioculcas samifolia, which most people know as a wardrobe flower, and it's a very, very tough flower. It can stand very dark and doesn't need that much water. And it has a stem that is very thick. You can almost feel the water inside of it. And also the leaves are quite hard, although they are thin. But this means that when you look at this plant and feel the leaves, you can see that it's quite hard, even though it's not that thick. But it means that it could be placed in a darker spot. So number 5 on our list is, again, looking at the leaves. But this time you're going to look at the size of the leaves. Does it have small and many leaves, or does it have big leaves and quite few leaves? Now the general idea is that the bigger the leaves are and the less leaves you have on the plant, the darker you can place it. And also it doesn't need that much water. But if you have very small leaves and you have a lot of them, it needs to be put in a light spot and it needs to have a little bit more water. So a little summary is that the things you need to look for is 1, and I'm telling you these in the order that we think that they are the most important. So start at the top, and 1 is of course the name, if you know the name. Number 2 is if there are any flowers on the plant, or if you know that it's going to flower soon. Number 3 is the color of the leaves. If it's dark green or if it has vibrant colors on it. Number 4 is the thickness of the leaves. Just feel the leaves, if it's thick or if it's thin. And the 5th one is the size of the leaves. If they are very, very small and a lot of them, or if they are quite big and not that many. So we thought we'd give you two examples of how you can do this. So we have two different plants here that fit these descriptions quite well, so that you can look at the process of doing this. So we can start by looking at this plant. Now this is the Schefflera arboricola, and this special variation is called I think it's called Golden Queen or something. By looking at this, first of all, we know that this is a Schefflera. And if you know that name before, you know that the Schefflera is an easy care plant, but it needs a little bit of light, usually. That is what I know just by the name. So that is number 1. And number 2 is looking if it has any flowers. Now, I know from experience as well that it doesn't flower that often. It flowers maybe once every 2 or 3 years, but that doesn't affect this. And there is no flowers on it, so okay, no flowers means that it could probably be put a little bit darker than if it had any flowers on it. Now number 3 is looking at the colors of the leaves. Now this is what we call a variegata form of the Schefflera. And so if I had a Schefflera that was all green and none of these variations in the leaves on them, then I should know that the all green version can be put a little bit darker than this version because it has these colors on it. So already now I know that this plant probably needs quite a lot of light. Now next thing is to look at the thickness of the leaves, and it has very, very thin leaves that are not very thick. I can easily bend them. There is you can almost feel my fingers straight through the leaves, which also means put it in a lighter spot, and it probably needs quite a lot of water as well. And the next thing is to look at the size of the leaves. And every leaf on this plant is quite small, and we have a lot of them, which also means it probably should be put in a light spot with a lot of water. And by experience, I know that this plant fits all of these descriptions quite well. So when I put this in my home, I need to put this Schefflera on a windowsill where it's quite light. And I also know that since it is a variegata form, it might even handle southern parts of your house, handle quite a lot of sun and quite a lot of light. But that also means it needs a lot of water. So you have to check and see that it doesn't dry out as much. So that is the first example. Now going to the next example. On the other end of the scale, you have a Dracaena. And this is the Dracaena Janet Lind version. So we're going to go through this again. One, you have the name. And if you know that this is a Dracaena, you can probably know from experience that Dracaenas can be put quite dark. They can handle this, and it doesn't need that much water. But going through the different points, and number 2, is it a flowering plant? Well, it is, but the Dracaena only flowers maybe every 6 to 8 years. So that's nothing to consider, which should mean that you can put it quite dark. Number 3 is the colors of the leaves. Now this Dracaena has a very, very dark green color, which tells me that it can be placed quite dark. And also you can look at the thickness of the leaves. Now this is where this plant maybe differs from our chart, because it has quite a thin leaf on it, and it's not that hard either. So in this point it goes on the other way, on the other scale. This should mean that it wants a little bit more light and maybe a little bit more water. But moving on, you have the size of the leaves as well. It has very big leaves in this case, which should also tell me it can be put in quite a dark spot and doesn't need that much water. So when we summarize all of these points, we can see that almost every point leans towards I can put this in quite a dark spot and it doesn't need that much water. So just by looking and feeling on this plant, I know approximately how to take care of it. Now, one last thing. When you have taken care of this plant for a little while, you're going to notice if you're doing this right or if you got it all wrong. And if you've done something wrong, there is another generalization you can make. And that is if the leaves here are beginning to be, it looks like they're drying out and becoming brown and hard and falling apart, very dry, then usually it means that you have given it too little water. But if instead the leaves are turning yellow, then it's usually a sign that you have given the plant too much water. And it can also be a sign that you have put it in a little bit too dark place. So you need to put it a little bit lighter. That is all we have for you this time. We hope you enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give us a comment in the commentary section. And please don't forget to subscribe, and we will try and teach you as much as we can about flowers, garden and plants. So until next time, hej då!